Well, the day is finally here. We're going to replace the belt tensioner on the Grand Prix. I've been out here for a few minutes getting set up, ready to go. Let me show you what I've got. Here's the new belt tensioner mechanism we'll be installing. And up on this box, I've gone ahead and gathered up all of the tools that I'll need to get this job done. One thing I learned while I was gathering up my tools, let me show you my tool tray. When I moved, I emptied out all of my sockets from this tool tray and I put them in a toolbox. And since I've been here, this is August, I've been here since December, I have not put my sockets back into their little holders. So it was a real pain in the butt today trying to gather up all the different size sockets I needed. Let me show you what that toolbox looks like. This is what I was sorting through, and it was a pain to find the sizes I needed. So a little side project we'll work on later today or tomorrow is we're going to get all these sorted into the tray so that they're much easier to locate and use. It'll simplify many jobs that I have to do coming up here in the near future. Here's the engine bay of the Grand Prix. Kind of seen this before, I think, when I was talking about the belt tensioner, but this is the device you'll be moving. It comes up here, that's part of it there. We're going to have to go ahead and remove this coolant overflow, get it out of the way. That'll free up some room between the sidewall and the belts that we have to get to remove. We'll get this belt removed and then we'll unbolt the belt tensioner. The first thing we need to remove is the coolant overflow tank, and they're held on by two 10mm nuts, and we'll just loosen them up. And the first nut of the day has been dropped. It's down in the engine compartment somewhere. We'll have to find that before we put this back together. But once the two nuts are removed, the coolant overflow just lifts up, and you can just basically stick it up here in the front of the car, out of the way. You don't have to fully remove it, just get it out of your way. I need to remove this accessory belt next. I've got a socket wrench, and this is one of those extension types, so it gives me a little more leverage. You will want something with leverage. You lock it in the reverse position, so lefty-loosey, like you're going to be loosening a nut, because this nut is threaded in reverse. It's 15mm. Put this on the belt tensioner, you pull back, and it will loosen up, and you can take the belt right off. There we go. In order to get the alternator out of the way, we're going to have to remove this bracket, and then there's a bolt here and two bolts in the back, and then we can lift the alternator out. What I had to do is I had to switch over to a deep well 15mm socket for the bolt on this bracket because of the amount of thread that's showing through. I can't get my standard socket on there. The other end of this bracket mounts to the engine block. Now, it may be hard to see in the video because the valve cover gasket may be restricting your view, but it is a 10mm bolt, and it's kind of down in there a ways, so I've gone ahead and grabbed an extension to make it a little easier for me to get to it. I'm going to loosen it up just enough. I'm going to leave it attached, but I'm going to loosen it up just enough to slide it out of my way. To remove the alternator, we've got a bolt here, and we've got two bolts in the back. So let's go ahead and get the front one taken care of. I've got it fairly loose. It's kind of binding a little bit, and I think if I take the two back ones and loosen them up, it'll make it easier to remove that one. So let's go ahead and get these back ones. We're going to go back to our extension to do that because they are buried down behind the alternator a little bit. There's one. much easier. the alternator out of the way and lay it up on the engine temporarily, making sure we don't damage anything. We need to remove these two hoses. Each of them has a 10mm bolt. This one's on the bottom, you can't really see it. I'm going to remove that bolt and then I'll wiggle the hoses out of the bracket for the belt tensioner. And then I've put a couple of zip ties up here, so I'm hoping to run the belts through the zip tie and tighten them down enough to hold them up in the air, because these do contain antifreeze and we are going to lose a little bit when we do this, but I'm hoping by zip tying them up in the air that I can reduce the amount that gets lost in the process. So we're going to use a box wrench because the clip here that holds the hose on is in the way of the nut and I can't get a socket on it. Wiggle it loose a little bit. There we go. Now this is probably going to make a mess, but we're not going to worry too much about it. It's coming loose. There it is. Whoa! See? A little bit of antifreeze. We can prop it here for just a minute, and then I'll zip tie the two of them together when I get the last one off. That one's kind of tough to get to. I think I'm going to take a pair of pliers, squeeze this clamp, and rotate it a little bit because the other ear to the clamp is right over top of the bolt. And while I've got it loosened up 3 or 4 turns, it's bumping against this clip. So let me get a pair of pliers, we'll move that, and we should be able to finish getting it off. Rotate it just a little bit. There we go. Now I've got a much better clearance on removing the bolt now. It's almost loose enough to remove by my fingers. A couple more turns with the wrench. There we go. Let's get this one removed. There we go. Oh. Alright, we'll slide the 2 of them up through this zip tie, and we'll just zip tie them up like that, and that should reduce any future leakage beyond what we've already spilled. We're now ready to remove the tensioner and its bracket. There are 3 bolts, one right on top you can see, one that slants toward the front of the engine a little bit that's not so easy to see, and one right here behind where these hoses connected that is difficult to see. All of them are 15mm. I've got my extensions, so let's go ahead and see if we can break them loose and get this removed. I've grabbed a shorter extension. This should make it a little easier. I am going to extend the wrench a little bit to give me some more leverage. Alright, excellent. She turned about 1 turn and then she tightened up again, so let's just get this wrench back in here. Alright, now let's see if we can take it out by hand. This antifreeze makes everything a little slick. It's tough to get a good grip. Alright, first bolt is removed. Let's go for this other one that's kind of hidden down in here. I'm going to check and see if the bolts are the same size. They are the same exact bolt, and the reason why I wanted to check is I didn't know if I needed to keep them separate because they were different lengths. And third and final bolt. My hands are so slippery right now I can barely turn this smooth steel for this extension. All right. Third and final bolt is out, and I can see that the bracket is free. All right, now we're going to be careful lifting this out because there are two plastic pipes on this that funnel the antifreeze from these two hoses either into or out of the block. And I want to make sure I don't break them. I have brand new ones, but I don't want to break them because I don't want pieces of them going back into the engine. The first of the two pipes is at the end of this either inlet or outlet for the antifreeze, and it's pointing at an angle like this, so if I lift back, that one will be fine. The one up front goes straight in, so it also needs to go back. So I'm just going to wiggle this up and back and see if I can break it loose. It's loosening up, but it hadn't given yet, so I don't want to force it because I don't want to break those. There we go. It's coming loose. I can see the front one wiggling out. There it is. Woo, a little more antifreeze. Actually, quite a lot of antifreeze. Now, I do have a problem. I broke this one. It's not a huge problem because I have a new one. However, this one was aluminum and the new one is plastic. That won't make a big deal. I did have them placed a while back. The other inlet is right here, and it is also aluminum. So we're going to leave that one on, and we'll replace this one with the plastic one, and we should be in good shape. Let me get rid of the rest of this antifreeze. I removed the aluminum tubing from the other belt tensioner bracket and installed it in this one, and I replaced the broken aluminum one with plastic on this end. Now, the plastic is what the car came with. I got 175,000 miles out of these before I replaced them with the aluminum ones. I feel really bad that I broke it, but I feel like with 200,000 miles on a car, you know, get another 175,000 out of that, that's not too bad. So, first thing we got to do is let's remove the broken piece from the block, and then we'll go ahead and get this piece seated on the block and bolted back up. On the rubber O-ring of these two pipes, I went ahead and put a little penetrating oil. I watched a mechanic do this, and it helps to seat them much more easily into the block. So let me just line the back one up first. All right, and then let me find the front one. There it is. All right, took me a second to find where it's seated, but I've got it. Let's make sure these seat. I'm getting the back one seated, but I'm having a little bit of trouble with the front one. Let's see if I can very carefully. There it is. There's the front one, and there's the back one. All right. All right. They are seated, and we are ready to reinstall the bolts to mount this bracket to the block. Lining it up carefully. All right, and that bolt is going in nice and smooth, so there's no binding. That's good. I'm checking. Everything looks like it's fitting great. So once I tighten the bolts down, it will help to lock those pipe fittings into place. So let's go ahead and get the other two bolts started. And that one started nice and easy. It's going in nice and smooth. That's good. No binding. All right, let's get the back one here. This one's a bit of a trick. All right. As soon as I can get it lined up there. All right, I think it's biting. Give me a second to twist it a few times. Yep, got it. It's biting. And I think it's going in. Oh yeah, nice and smooth. I can turn it by hand. That's good. So I'm going to tighten these up as far as I can by hand. And then we'll go back and use our wrench, or our socket wrench. All right. Using a 15mm socket wrench on an extension, I'm just going to try to turn them by hand a little more. That one's in all the way. This one can turn a few turns. Let me get this one set up and going. All right, nice, nice, nice. All right, I'm going to take this deep well off and put the standard socket back on, and we're ready to tighten. I'm just going to snug it up a little bit, and then I'm going to snug the top two up, and then I need to take a look at what the torque, I believe it's 20 foot-pounds of torque, but I want to look at the instructions real quick and make sure, because I don't want to over tighten and damage anything, and I don't want them to be under tight so that they loosen up. So hang tight while I check the torque specs on those bolts. I'm glad I checked, because we are torquing to 37 foot-pounds of torque. Get this lined up on here. All right, watch. Okay, we are at about 18 foot-pounds, 20. Let me reseat it. And okay, we're going to 25, 28, and 30. We're about 32 right there. And 35, 36. Ooh, I am so close. 38 foot-pounds. Okay, I'm not going to count the other two off, but I'm going to go ahead and get them tightened down to the required torque spec. Okay, that one's good. I'm going to need to get an extension for this one, and I'll get the last one tightened down. This one could be a bit tough. I don't have a deep well socket for the 1/2-inch wrench, and I don't have a short extension, so we're going to have to do this one. I don't know how I'm going to do this one. I think I'm just going to have to, I've got two of them at 37. I'm just going to have to tighten this one down until I feel I'm close, because I don't really have the tool that I need. All right, I'm going to call that good. I need to replace these two hoses, so I'm going to go ahead and cut the zip tie, let them fall, and then I'll get them installed into their proper locations. And I've got my 10mm wrench. We'll get them tightened down. There we go. I'll leave that one up top for a minute. Hopefully it'll leak a little less. Get this one seated. All right, that looks good. Now, 10mm wrench, and let me grab one of the screws and get that reattached. Oh, everything lined up beautifully back there. It's just a matter now of tightening it all down. Go as far as we can by hand. And once it bottoms out, grab our wrench. Give it a good snug. All right, that one's good. Now for the top one. There we go. Got her started now. Good and tight. Let's get this other zip tie out of the way. And let's go get the alternator and get it reinstalled. Well, I didn't have to go very far because the alternator is sitting right here. All right, let's flip it over. This bracket out of the way. We'll line this bolt up on the front first. Go ahead and snug it up a little bit by hand to make sure we have the threads aligned properly. Okay. Got this bolt back here. Back it out of the way. There we are. Make sure we're lined up. All right, it's going in nice and smooth. I'll just tighten that one almost all the way down. Now we got this very long bolt. All right, let me grab my wrench and we'll finish this off. I'm just going to take it almost to snug. I want to make sure I get all the bolts all the way in before I snug it down. All right, snug them down. Need to replace our alternator bracket. I'm just going to lift it up, drop it right back on the bolt. I'll start this one by hand, tighten it down, and now I'll go back and get the bolt back in the back tightened. Let me grab my extension. There's one. Deep well 15 millimeter. That was 10 millimeter back there. Got the deep well 15 millimeter. And we'll go ahead and tighten this bracket down. Something that I didn't point out in the beginning, but I'll go ahead and show you now, is right here on the car is a diagram of how the belt runs. It goes around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different pulleys, and we need to make sure that we follow this diagram exactly. Now, before you remove your belt, your accessory belt from your vehicle, make sure you either have one of these or you take a photo of the way your belt runs. Okay, let me see what I got here. This is the tricky part. This goes around here. Oop. Around the crank. There it is. All right, we'll go around the crank, we come up, we go around the alternator. All right, got it around the bottom, and now we're coming up around the alternator. All right, and then we go from the alternator down to the power steering. Get that on the power steering. This goes around here, comes from the power steering up to the tensioner. Got to go around the water pump. And I think, let's see, that goes up over there, goes around the water pump, and that goes back around there. Yeah, okay, we got it. All right. Let's put it around here. Oops, I just loosened it up again. I just lost the crank. There we go. Get back around the crank. All right. Then it pulls up from here. Yeah. All right. We got it ready. And let's see. Here it is. Need to put that on loosen. Let's extend it fully. And shoot. Tell you what, we'll take it off the alternator and get it around the belt tensioner. and then we'll get it around the power steering, and then we can put it on the alternator as we loosen the belt tensioner. Everything's run right. All right, I'm ready to crank this back. Take the pressure off of it. Sorry about getting in front of the camera, but this is not easy to do. There we go. Okay. Whew. You need to have about 3 arms. Let me double check everything to make sure that it runs right. We go from the alternator down to the power steering, from the power steering up to the belt tensioner, from the belt tensioner across the water pump. From the water pump we go down around the crank. From the crank we go around the AC compressor and back up to the alternator. Okay, we have it installed properly. Let's get our overflow tank reinstalled. We just twist it around, and there's a little thing on the bottom that it slides over. There it is. Raise it up just enough to put it on there. All right. These you don't want to tighten down too much because it's just plastic and you'll just crush it. So we're just going to snug them. There we go. Now, I dropped one of the nuts down into the engine compartment. I was unable to find it. I'm hoping it fell all the way through and is on the ground beneath the car. So when I remove the car, I'll look for it and add it. If it's not, I'll swing into the auto parts store and I'll pick up another 10mm nut and drop it on the top of there. At this point, I think we're ready to start the car and see if she runs. Check for leaks, that type of thing. Before I start the car, I'm going to take a quick look in the radiator. We lost quite a bit of antifreeze. I don't know if the radiator will be low at this point, but once I start the car running and it starts circulating the antifreeze, I expect the level to drop. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to fill it until I'm able to get it topped off. Let's remove the radiator cap first. Let me adjust the camera down so you can see. We'll remove our radiator cap. There it is. Take a peek down in there. It is literally full all the way up to the spout, so I'm not going to add any at this point. I'm going to start the engine, leaving the radiator cap off. I'm going to let the antifreeze circulate, and then we'll add as needed. I'm just going to do a quick once over to make sure there are no tools laying anywhere in the engine compartment or around on the engine, and it looks like I've picked everything up. So let's turn the motor over and see what happens. Seems to be running smooth. I no longer have the knocking noise. The end of the belt tensioner was rocking up and down on the old belt tensioner. It's nice and steady now. The belts are tight. The engine's running smooth. I'm going to consider this a success. I'm just going to watch the antifreeze and continue to fill it as needed. And it's already gone down, so I'm going to go ahead and start topping off the antifreeze. I'm not sure how much I'll end up adding. I know that my overflow tank was full to the cold mark when I started because it had plenty of antifreeze in it when I took it out. So it's going to probably remove the antifreeze from the overflow tank first as it circulates through the system. So once the car runs, I may just need to fill this back up to the cold mark. We're just going to let it run for a while and keep an eye on it. Everything seems to be running really smooth. I'm very happy so far. I ended up adding a little bit of coolant to the system. It's not dropping down even with the heater on, so I feel like I've got the right amount in there. I am going to let the engine cool completely, and then I will fill the overflow reservoir up to the cool line. One last thing I did, let me point this out. I never found the 10mm nut that I dropped earlier, but I did find the 10mm nut that I had in the shop, so I went ahead and added that on the back. It's nice and tight, everything's secure. I'm going to call this job done. Well, the job went pretty smooth. The engine's running really smooth right now, sounds good, no knocking noise, so I think I've got the belt tensioner issue taken care of. All that's left to do is two things. Number one, I'm going to take it for a little test drive around the block. I'll pop the hood, re-look at it, make sure everything looks okay. Then I'm going to let it set and cool, and once it's cool, I'll go ahead and refill the antifreeze in the reservoir. I want to give you guys a quick update on the Grand Prix. I took it out for a little test drive. Drove, I don't know, 2.5 miles maybe. Enough to warm the engine up. I ran the heater, I ran the air conditioner. I brought it back home. I let it set while I trimmed the yard and cleaned up after myself. And it cooled off. I went and checked the system. There's no antifreeze under the car. All of the fittings, I took those 2 hoses and those 2 plastic elbows off. Perfectly dry around those, so I'm real happy about that. I ended up adding about 1/2 gallon of antifreeze to the system. It was full when I started because I just had it flushed not too long ago, but I had added about 1/2 gallon of antifreeze to the system, the 50/50 stuff, and I think we're good to go. I'll check it over the course of the next week or so, just to make sure there are no air bubbles in the system that I've got to account for. But overall, I think it's a success, and I'm really happy. So just wanted to give you a quick update. Thanks once again for following along, and I'll talk to you soon.